The call came on a Tuesday, the kind of gray, unremarkable afternoon that usually fades from memory by dinner time. I was in the workshop, sanding down an old oak chair I intended to restore, when my phone buzzed against the workbench. It was Morgan. I wiped the sawdust from my hands, smiling as I swiped to answer, expecting a question about the rehearsal dinner or perhaps another request for the guest list. Instead, her voice was thin, like wire stretched to its breaking point. She didn't say hello. She just started speaking, the words tumbling out in a rehearsed cadence that told me she had practiced this speech in front of a mirror. She told me that after her recent session, she and her therapist had come to a difficult conclusion. She said that for her mental well-being, for the sanctity of her big day, I couldn't be there. My daughter banned me from her wedding. The sentence hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. She used words like safe space and emotional regulation, but the message was blunt. I stood there, the smell of sawdust and varnish filling my nose, trying to comprehend how a father goes from being the bedrock of a family to a liability. It is a strange thing to be discarded by the person you taught to walk. It forces you to question the very architecture of your life. Before I tell you how this unraveled, I want to welcome you here. If you appreciate stories about standing your ground, please click the like button and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Tell me in the comments where you are watching from today, and subscribe so we can continue this conversation together. Morgan continued, filling the silence I left behind. She explained that her therapist believed I was a trigger. That word, trigger, felt clinical and cold, stripped of any warmth or history. She said my presence brought up historical patterns of anxiety that she couldn't risk on the most important day of her life. She assured me with a strange, detached kindness that this wasn't about punishment. It was about protection. I leaned against the workbench, looking at the oak chair. It was sturdy, reliable, built to hold weight without complaining. I realized in that moment that I had been the same way for Morgan. I had absorbed every shock, paid every bill, and smoothed every road. Now, I was being told that my very structure was the problem. I asked her, keeping my voice level, if this was final. She said yes. She said she hoped I could respect her boundary. Respect is a heavy word when used to demand submission. It made me realize that for some people, boundaries are not walls to keep bad things out, but gates they can lock from the inside while keeping your resources in the yard. Then came the pivot. It was so seamless, it was almost impressive. In the same breath as she banned me from the ceremony, she brought up the venue. She mentioned that the final deposit for the vineyard estate was due next week and that the caterers needed the confirmed head count, which would adjust the final invoice. She spoke about these expenses as if they were separate entities from me, as if my credit card was an autonomous donor that existed independently of the man she had just exiled. She didn't ask if I would still pay. She assumed it. The entitlement wasn't malicious. It was foundational. She had lived her entire life standing on my shoulders, so she naturally assumed she could continue to stand there, even if she was kicking me in the face. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. When you realize you are being used, anger is often the second emotion. The first is a profound, hollow clarity. I told her I heard her. I told her I understood her position. I didn't tell her what I was about to do. We ended the call. I stood in the silence of my workshop for a long time. The silence of a house that is no longer a home for your children is deafening. I thought about the wedding binders sitting on my desk in the study, thick with contracts and invoices, every single one of them bearing my signature as the guarantor. My daughter banned me from her wedding. so I took my money with me. Now she was about to learn a lesson that no therapist had evidently covered. Autonomy works both ways. If I was too toxic to witness the vows, surely I was too toxic to finance the champagne. I walked into the house, washed the dust from my hands, and went to my study. I didn't open the binder immediately. I just sat there, staring at the spine of it. It represented nearly a year of planning, thousands of dollars, and a lifetime of expectation. Closing that book wouldn't just be a financial decision, it would be the end of an era. It was the moment I stopped being a savior and started being a person. That evening, the emails started rolling in. An automated reminder from the florist, a query from the band about the set list, a notification from the venue about the upcoming automatic deduction. Every single message greeted me by name. Dear Bruno, thank you for your continued business. It stung. It was a humiliation that burned slow and deep. I was the VIP of the billing department and the persona non grata of the event. It made me think about how often parents are reduced to infrastructure, necessary, silent, and only noticed when they malfunction. If you have ever felt like your generosity was mistaken for obligation, or if you've ever been pushed aside by the very people you supported, you understand this ache. It's a specific kind of lonely. Please take a second to subscribe to the channel. It helps us tell these stories, and it reminds us that we aren't invisible, no matter what our families might say. 2 days passed. Morgan texted me photos of the table settings, asking if I thought the gold chargers looked better than the silver. It was surreal. She was crowdsourcing opinions from a ghost. She was treating me like a remote consultant for a project I had been fired from. I typed out a neutral response. Gold looks fine. I sent it, feeling a disconnect in my chest. By engaging with the minutiae, I was enabling her delusion. I was allowing her to believe that she could curate her reality so selectively, keeping my taste in my wallet while rejecting my physical form. It revealed a lack of empathy that was terrifying. To her, I wasn't a human being with feelings of rejection. I was a function. I was Dad the provider, a role she apparently thought I would play, regardless of how she treated Dad the human. On Friday, I opened the binder. I began to read the fine print I had skimmed over months ago. I wasn't reading for dates anymore. I was reading for liability. The venue contract was explicit. The primary financial guarantor reserves the right to modify or revoke services up to 30 days prior to the event. We were 32 days out. I felt a cold resolve settle in my gut. It wasn't revenge. Revenge is hot and messy. This was distinct. It was a realignment of reality. If the narrative was that I was dangerous to her mental health, then I had a moral obligation to remove myself entirely. To leave my financial footprint would be inconsistent with her diagnosis. I decided to call my friend, Victor. Victor is a retired judge, a man who has seen families tear each other apart over much less than this. We met for coffee, and I laid it all out. The ban, the therapist, the expectation of payment. Victor listened, stirring his black coffee, his face unreadable. When I finished, he looked at me and said, Bruno, she has set a boundary. She has every right to do that. But you have a right to your dignity. You are not a line item in a budget. Hearing it from someone else solidified it. We often gaslight ourselves into staying in abusive dynamics because we call it love or duty. But duty does not require you to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, especially when they have locked you out of the house. The weekend came and went. Morgan sent more texts, a picture of her shoes, a complaint about the bridesmaids' dress alterations. I stopped replying. The silence on my end was the only warning she was going to get, though she was too self-absorbed to hear it. I spent the time organizing my digital files. I downloaded every receipt, every email exchange where she acknowledged I was paying, every contract. I was building a fortress of evidence, not for a court of law, but for the court of public opinion. The inevitable backlash from the family when the checks bounced. It is painful to prepare for war against your own child. It goes against every biological imperative. But I reminded myself that I didn't start this war. I was just refusing to surrender my self-respect as a casualty. Monday morning arrived. I woke up with a clarity that surprised me. I didn't feel sad anymore. I felt efficient. I went to the bank first. I wanted to see the numbers in black and white. I looked at the savings account I had earmarked for this wedding. Money that represented years of early mornings and late nights. I thought about what that money could do. It could fix the roof. It could fund a trip I'd always wanted to take. It could sit there, gathering interest, just like I should have been doing for myself all these years. I sent one final text to Morgan. Are you sure about the decision regarding my attendance? Is there no room for discussion? Her reply came 3 hours later. Dad, please don't make this harder than it is. I need to prioritize myself. The answer is still no. That was the seal on the warrant. I sat at my desk, the glow of the monitor illuminating the dark room. I typed out a summary of the situation for my own records, a way to anchor myself before I pulled the trigger. I wrote it down, capitalizing the absurdity of it in my mind. My daughter asked me to stay away from her wedding because her therapist said I was a trigger. I stayed away, but I also stayed smart. I declined the venue that was booked under my card, alerted the caterers, and sent a copy of my revoked deposit to her inbox. By the time she realized, it was too late. I made sure the consequences matched the request. Reading those words back, I saw the situation for what it was. It wasn't a tragedy. It was a transaction she had initiated, and I was simply closing the account. The first call was to the venue. The coordinator, a woman named Sarah, who had always been very polite, answered on the second ring. I kept my voice calm. I gave her the account number. I told her that I was exercising my right as the financial guarantor to decline the reservation. There was a confused silence on the line. Sir, the wedding is in a month. If you decline now, you lose the initial deposit, and the date is released. I understand, I said. Release the date. Refund the remaining balance to the card on file. She asked if I wanted to transfer the liability to another party. I told her no. That would be enabling. If Morgan wanted the venue, she could sign a new contract and pay the full price herself. Next were the caterers, then the florist, then the band. It was a domino effect of unmaking. With each call, I felt a weight lifting off my chest. I was dismantling the stage where I was meant to be the invisible prop. There is a profound power in saying no after a lifetime of saying yes. It reconfigures your soul. I realized that my generosity had been taken for granted because I had never established a cost for it. The cost was respect, and since the currency of respect was counterfeit, the goods were being recalled. I wasn't doing this to hurt her. I was doing this to show her reality. Reality is that weddings cost money, and people who are banned from attending generally do not pay for the party. By noon, it was done. The venue was declined. The vendors were notified. The thousands of dollars that were scheduled to leave my account were now staying right where they were. I drafted an email to Morgan. I attached the cancellation confirmations. I kept the body of the email short. Morgan, I have respected your wish for me not to attend. As I am a trigger for you, I have removed myself entirely from the equation, including the financial stress of my involvement. I have declined the services under my name. You are free to rebook them under your own name and credit. I wish you the best. I hit send. I turned off my phone. I knew what was coming. I went out to the workshop and picked up the sandpaper again. The rhythmic motion of sanding wood is meditative. It reminds you that with enough pressure and time, you can smooth out even the roughest surfaces. I imagined the scene unfolding across town, the notification popping up on her screen, the confusion, the slow dawning horror as she realized that stay away meant stay away. We often teach our children that actions have consequences, but we rarely let them feel the full brunt of them. We shield them. Today, the shield was gone. She was standing in the rain, and she had confiscated my umbrella. I turned my phone back on 3 hours later. 17 missed calls, 40 texts. Not just from Morgan, but from her fiancé, Jared. From my ex-wife, from Morgan's maid of honor. The texts ranged from, "Dad, call me immediately," to, "How could you do this? And you're ruining everything." I didn't reply to any of them. I didn't need to defend myself. The contracts were clear. The boundary she set was clear. I was simply abiding by the rules she had established. It revealed so much about their character. They weren't panicked about my absence. They were panicked about the money. The grief was financial, not emotional. The landline rang. I had forgotten to unplug it. I answered it out of habit. It was Morgan. She wasn't crying, she was screaming. A raw, guttural sound of entitlement being fractured. "You canceled my wedding," she yelled. "I didn't cancel the wedding," I said calmly. "I declined the contracts in my name. You can still have the wedding. You just have to pay for it." "You know we can't afford that venue," she sobbed. "You did this to spite me because of the therapy." "I did this," I corrected, "because you told me I was harmful to your mental health. I removed the harm. You cannot ask a person to disappear and then demand they leave their wallet behind. That isn't a boundary, Morgan. That's a robbery." She handed the phone to Jared. Jared, who had always been tepid towards me, now found his voice. He tried to be authoritative. "Bruno, this is childish. You made a commitment. We have invitations sent out." "And I was uninvited," I countered. "Jared, you are a grown man. If you want a luxury wedding, write a check. Do not lecture me on commitments when you are marrying a woman who banned her father from the ceremony to please a therapist she's known for 6 months. He sputtered. "We will sue you." I actually laughed. "Read the contracts, Jared. I am the client. I have the right to cancel. Good luck." I hung up. The aftermath was exactly as I expected. They scrambled. They had to downsize. The vineyard was gone. They ended up booking a community hall nearby. The gourmet catering was replaced by a local taco truck, which, frankly, probably tasted better. I didn't go, obviously. I spent that Saturday fishing at a lake 2 towns over. The water was still, the air was crisp, and for the first time in months, my anxiety was gone. I heard through the grapevine that the wedding was intimate, and that Morgan spent a good portion of the reception complaining about my toxicity. Let her talk. I kept my dignity, and I kept my retirement fund. It has been 6 months since that day. We haven't spoken. The silence is heavy, but it is peaceful. I realized that by drawing that line, I wasn't just saving my money, I was saving my soul. I refused to be an accessory to my own disrespect. There comes a time when you have to choose between being a good parent, by their definition, and being a person who respects themselves. I chose the latter. It came with a cost, but the price of admission to a life where I am not used is worth it. If you are holding on to a relationship that hurts you just because you are afraid of the silence that comes after letting go, consider this your sign. You are worth more than what you can provide for others. Please hit that subscribe button if this story resonated with you. It's a small click for you, but it means the world to us. Remember, you can love them, but you don't have to finance their disrespect. Stay strong.